Commander Lara Wilkins stood at the window of the ship's bridge, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars shimmered like diamonds, each one a potential world waiting to be discovered. Her mission was simple on paper: travel to the distant Cathari system, negotiate peace, and return home. But peace was always more complicated than it seemed. The Cathari were an ancient species, one of the deadliest in the galaxy. They had a reputation for ruthlessness and strength, capable of destroying entire fleets with ease. The Terran Federation had learned this the hard way during their first few encounters, but over the years they had managed to maintain a tense truce. Humans, though not as physically imposing as the Cathari, had learned to survive by being clever and resourceful. Today, Lara was on a diplomatic mission to the Cathari homeworld. She knew that the stakes were high and the pressure was immense. The Federation's leaders had been pushing for a lasting peace agreement with the Cathari for months. A formal peace treaty would end years of hostility and open the door to new alliances. But after the last failed negotiations, everyone knew it was more likely that war was on the horizon. Lara felt a knot in her stomach as the ship neared the Cathari system. She had faced many dangers in her career, but nothing like this. She turned to her communications officer, Lieutenant Marcus, who had been silent for most of the journey. "How are we looking, Marcus?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the tension building in her chest. "We're within range of their fleet, Commander," he replied, his tone sharp. "They're waiting for us just as we expected." The Cathari had an enormous battle fleet stationed in orbit around their planet. Lara knew that one wrong move could lead to disaster. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Prepare the transmission," Lara ordered. "Let's get this over with." Marcus nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. Moments later, the face of the Cathari ambassador appeared on the screen. He was tall and imposing, with sharp features that made him seem almost like a living weapon. His piercing yellow eyes regarded Lara with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Commander Wilkins," the ambassador said in a voice that was deep and gravely, like the rumble of distant thunder. "We have been expecting you." Lara stood tall, her back straight, and her expression professional. "Ambassador, thank you for meeting with us. I come on behalf of the Terran Federation to discuss the terms of a potential peace treaty." There was a long pause. The Cathari ambassador's expression didn't change, but Lara could sense the calculation behind his eyes. The Cathari were not known for their trust, especially not with humans. "You come to talk of peace?" he finally said. "Do you think peace is possible after all the bloodshed between our people?" Lara didn't flinch. "I believe it is. We both want stability. We both want our people to prosper. If we can come to a fair agreement, then we can end the war and move forward." The ambassador's lips curled into something resembling a smile, but it wasn't friendly. "We have no need for such treaties, Commander. We are strong. Our power is unmatched. The Terran Federation has always been weak, always relying on your machines and your numbers. You are not worthy of peace." Lara felt the tension in the room increase, but she kept her voice steady. "Peace isn't about strength, it's about cooperation. The Federation respects your strength. But we know that war brings destruction to both sides. There is no winner in a war like that." The ambassador's eyes narrowed, and Lara could see the flicker of something dangerous in his gaze. "Your words are weak, Commander," he said coldly. "But perhaps we will give you a chance for now." Lara's heart raced, but she didn't show it. "Thank you. We are prepared to negotiate." The ambassador didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his head slightly, and his voice grew even colder. "However," he added, "there is one thing you should know. If you come here thinking you can deceive us, you are gravely mistaken. The Cathari do not tolerate weakness or trickery. If you are not sincere in your offer, we will wipe you out." Lara's breath caught. "I assure you, Ambassador, our offer is sincere. We are ready to work towards a peaceful future." The Cathari ambassador leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Finally he nodded. "We shall see." The transmission cut out abruptly. The screen in front of Lara went black, leaving the room heavy with silence. The crew on the bridge exchanged uneasy glances, their faces a mix of worry and confusion. "Well," Lara said, breaking the silence, "that didn't go exactly as planned." Marcus turned in his seat, his eyes wide. "Commander, I've just received a communication from the Cathari fleet. They're preparing to move. It looks like they've misunderstood your statement about cooperation and are treating it as a declaration of war." Lara's heart sank. She had been careful with her words, but something had gone wrong. The Cathari had misunderstood her intention. Perhaps her phrasing had been too vague. And now the most lethal species in the galaxy was preparing to attack. "Get us out of here," Lara ordered. "Engage the warp drives. We need to warn the fleet." But before the order could be fully carried out, the alarms blared. The ship lurched violently, and the lights flickered. They had already been targeted. "Shields up!" Lara shouted, gripping the armrest of her chair as the ship shook. "Brace for impact!" The first blast struck with terrifying force, sending the bridge crew tumbling. Lara's vision blurred, but she held on, forcing herself to focus. "Report!" she yelled through the chaos. Marcus struggled to regain his composure. "The Cathari fleet has launched an attack, Commander. They're not just threatening us, they're firing on us." Lara's mind raced. A misunderstanding was quickly turning into a disaster. There was no time to waste. The Cathari had declared war on them, and humanity was now at the mercy of a species with unimaginable power. "Send out an emergency distress signal," Lara ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We may be outgunned, but we're not out of options yet." As the ship shook again, Lara knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. Humanity had just declared war on the most lethal species alive. That's the first part of the story. It sets the stage with a tense, high-stakes diplomatic mission that quickly escalates into an all-out crisis, and it keeps the readers hooked with the growing conflict. Let me know if you'd like any changes or additions. The Terran ship rocked under the force of the Cathari attack. Every blast felt like the ship's hull might crack open, and the crew struggled to hold on as the emergency alarms blared in their ears. Commander Lara Wilkins gripped the armrest of her seat, her knuckles white. Her mind raced. This had escalated quickly. She had made a simple mistake in her attempt at diplomacy, and now they were fighting for their lives. "Damage report," she shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Shields at 60%, Commander," Lieutenant Marcus replied, his face pale. "We've taken multiple hits to the starboard side. The engines are still functioning, but not at full power." Lara clenched her jaw. They were in no position to fight the Cathari head-on. Their enemy's fleet was enormous and vastly superior in firepower. The Terran ship, though equipped with advanced technology, was no match for the might of the Cathari warships. "Can we make it to the outer system?" Lara asked. Marcus hesitated. "It's risky. The Cathari are relentless. If we try to escape, they'll hunt us down, and we don't have enough power to outrun them." Lara's mind worked quickly. They had no choice but to try. "Set course for the nearby planet," she ordered. "We'll have to go in close. Use the atmosphere to shield us. It's our best shot." The crew scrambled into action, working together, as they had done countless times before. Despite the terror gripping them, each person knew their role. Marcus manipulated the controls, sending the ship barreling toward the planet's atmosphere, while other officers activated the ship's defense systems. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, Lara looked out the window. The planet below was an alien world, a rocky, barren place with jagged mountains and a deep, dusty red landscape. It was far from the ideal refuge, but it was the only place they could escape to for now. They needed to hide, regroup, and think of a way to survive. "We've lost contact with the fleet," Marcus reported. "I'm picking up several Cathari ships in orbit, but they haven't pursued us yet. They're waiting." Lara nodded, her eyes narrowing. The Cathari were tactical. They were not likely to follow them into the planet's thick atmosphere unless they were certain of a kill. It was a strange advantage they could use. "We'll make them think we're dead in the water," Lara said. "Shut down all unnecessary systems and keep low to the ground. We can't afford to make any noise. The crew worked quickly, powering down everything except the bare essentials. The ship became eerily quiet, the hum of the engines fading to a soft whisper as they glided through the clouds. The Cathari were used to hunting prey in space, but they hadn't mastered the art of atmospheric pursuit the way humans had. They would be forced to wait. Hours passed, and as the sun dipped below the horizon of the alien world, Lara allowed herself a moment of rest. She slumped in her seat, her body aching from the tension of the past few hours. Her mind kept spinning. How had this gone so wrong? One diplomatic mistake, and now their entire fleet was at risk of being destroyed. Marcus broke the silence. "Commander, I've found something. There's a cave system about 200 kilometers to the north. It's deep and large enough to hide the ship for a while. If we can make it there, we might be able to repair the engines and plan our next move." Lara's eyes brightened. It was a small hope, but it was something. "We're going to need supplies. Start scanning for any resources we can use along the way." The ship's sensors picked up signs of water and some basic minerals further along their path, and after a few minutes, Lara gave the order. "Set course for the caves. If we're going to survive, we need to get our footing first." The crew worked together as the ship slowly made its way across the planet's surface. The alien world was harsh. Dust storms swept across the terrain and the rocky hills made the journey difficult. But the ship was agile, and they were skilled at navigating difficult environments. Every so often, Lara glanced at the screen, her thoughts lingering on the looming threat in space. The Cathari would be watching, waiting. It was only a matter of time before they discovered the ship's true location. The cave system was deep, hidden beneath the rocky surface. It wasn't long before the Terran ship settled into a dark, quiet alcove. Lara didn't allow herself to relax just yet. They had a little breathing room, but only for a short while. "How long do we have before they find us?" she asked Marcus, her voice hard. Marcus looked at the sensor readouts, his fingers flying over the console. "It's hard to say. They know we're down here somewhere, but with the atmospheric interference, they can't pinpoint us yet. We've got maybe a few hours before they begin a full search." Lara nodded. "That's our window. We need to get to work." The crew worked quickly to repair the damaged ship, focusing on the engines first. It wasn't much, just some basic tools and parts, but they were used to making do with less. Lara couldn't help but admire the resilience of her crew. Despite the dire situation, everyone had their focus on the same goal: survival. After hours of intense work, the ship was ready for a limited escape. It wasn't fully repaired, but the engines were functional enough to get them off the planet and into space. Lara stood up, wiping the dust from her hands. She turned to Marcus. "We have one shot at this. If we go up now, we'll need to be quick. We can't afford to be slow or visible." "Understood, Commander," Marcus replied, his face grim. "We'll be ready." Lara took a deep breath. Their enemies, the Cathari, were out there. They were relentless, but humans had something the Cathari didn't: resilience. They wouldn't give up. No matter how impossible the odds seemed, they would keep fighting. As the ship slowly ascended from the cave and made its way back into space, Lara felt a strange sense of determination surge through her. They had survived the first wave of the Cathari's wrath, but this was far from over. The war had only just begun, and humanity's resilience would be the key to winning it. "We'll fight no matter what," Lara muttered to herself. "We'll show them what humans can do." And with that, the ship soared into the stars, ready to face whatever came next. This part highlights humanity's resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, showing that even when outmatched, the human spirit and ingenuity can find ways to survive. It keeps the tension rising while providing hope for the crew's future. "Let me know if you'd like any changes." The Terran ship hovered just above the planet's atmosphere, hidden beneath the cover of its thick clouds. Inside the ship, the crew worked in tense silence. Commander Lara Wilkins paced back and forth, her mind focused on the critical next steps. They had survived the first attack by the Cathari, but this was far from over. Their enemies were relentless and time was running out. Lara stepped into the ship's operations room, where Lieutenant Marcus and Chief Engineer Reese were huddled over the ship's damaged systems. She needed answers, and fast. The Cathari fleet would be launching a search for them any minute now. They had no guarantee that they could escape once again. How much longer until we can leave this planet? Lara asked, her tone calm but firm. Reese looked up from the console. We've patched up the engines as best as we can, Commander, but we're still running on limited power. We need more resources to get the ship fully operational. If we don't find something soon, we won't make it out of here. Lara's thoughts raced. The ship was barely hanging together. They had no choice but to find a way to get the materials they needed. We can't stay here long. The Cathari will track us down. We need to find a place on this planet where we can gather supplies. Marcus spoke up, his voice low but thoughtful. There's a cave system to the north, Commander. It's deeper than the one we used to hide in. We might find minerals, maybe even some water, but it's a risk. The Cathari might have sent out scouts already. Lara's jaw tightened. The Cathari were powerful, but they weren't invincible. If they kept pushing forward with the right strategy, they could turn the tide. The humans had their brains and their ability to outlast their enemies. They weren't going to give up now. We'll take that risk, Lara said. Prepare the crew. We're heading to that cave system. It was a gamble, but it was their best chance. With a quick nod, Marcus and Reese moved to prepare the team. The rest of the crew scattered to their stations, ready for whatever came next. As the ship ascended once again, the barren landscape of the planet stretched below them. The jagged mountains, dusty plains, and sharp cliffs seemed endless. The Cathari were a ruthless species, but their tactics had a flaw, one that Lara was determined to exploit. They thought like warriors, not hunters, and that gave humans an edge. Humans were quick to adapt, fast to think on their feet. After a tense few hours, the ship landed just outside the cave system. The crew gathered their equipment, preparing to leave the relative safety of the ship. The atmosphere on the planet was harsh, but the caves offered a chance to regroup. They would have to move quickly, though. The Cathari would not wait long before they launched their search. Lara's boots crunched on the rocky surface as she led the crew toward the entrance. The cave system was massive, its dark corridors twisting into the planet's depths. They could use the shadows to their advantage, hiding from the Cathari's advanced tracking systems. The planet's thick atmosphere had already helped them avoid detection once, and it would be their ally again. Inside the cave, the temperature dropped, and the air grew thinner. The crew moved cautiously, each step echoing off the stone walls. They couldn't afford to make any noise. If they alerted the Cathari, it would be over. They would have no choice but to fight, and that was a battle they couldn't win. As they ventured deeper, Lara found herself looking around, searching for any sign of usable resources. The walls of the cave were rich with minerals, and she could hear the soft trickle of water further down the passage. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Commander," Marcus said, breaking her concentration, "I've picked up some readings. There's a vein of iron deeper in the cave along with some water deposits. It might be enough to get us through." Lara nodded. "Good. Let's get to work." The crew set to work, gathering the iron and water. Reese began to examine the materials carefully, his eyes lighting up with the excitement of discovery. "This will be enough," he said, grinning. "We can use the iron to reinforce the ship's hull and craft a few more tools. The water will help us stay hydrated long enough for us to make repairs." Lara allowed herself a moment of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. They weren't entirely powerless. They could rebuild, even if it meant working in the shadows of the Cathari's threat. As the crew worked, Lara couldn't help but feel a strange sense of hope rise within her. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity had proven time and time again that they were capable of things no one expected. The Cathari underestimated them, and that was their greatest mistake. But just as Lara started to think they might have a chance, the silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of distant footsteps, heavy, calculated, and relentless. "Everyone, quiet!" Lara hissed, motioning for the crew to freeze. She pressed her back against the cave wall, listening intently. The Cathari had arrived. They were here, and they had found them. Lara's heart pounded in her chest. They didn't have much time. The Cathari would be moving in soon, and the crew needed to make a decision. They couldn't outrun them, but they could hide. They could use the terrain to their advantage and launch a surprise strike. "We're not running this time," Lara whispered to herself. "We're not running." She turned to Marcus. "How long do we have before they're in range?" Marcus checked his readings, his face tight with anxiety. "Maybe 20 minutes, Commander." "Good. Get the ship ready for departure. We'll need to move quickly once we're done here." Lara's mind raced. She needed to find a way to turn the tables. The Cathari were hunting them. But what if they could turn it around? What if they could use the Cathari's own tactics against them? "There's one thing I've learned about the Cathari," Lara said, her voice steady. "They don't expect us to fight back. But we will. We will fight them, not head-on, but by outsmarting them." Marcus gave her a sharp nod. "Understood, Commander." Lara's mind was made up. It was time to show the Cathari what humans were truly capable of. They had been underestimated, but they had something far more powerful than strength: the will to survive. It was the one thing the Cathari could never take away. As the crew prepared to face whatever the Cathari had in store, Lara couldn't help but smile. They had a chance. Against all odds, they had a chance to win this war, and humanity would not back down. This part focuses on the crew's resilience and resourcefulness as they use their surroundings to survive and gather resources. It builds tension, hints at a plan for turning the situation around, and showcases human determination against overwhelming odds. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. The Cathari were near. Lara Wilkins could hear their footsteps echoing through the cave system, growing louder by the second. She pressed herself against the rough stone wall, trying to keep her breath steady. The crew had gathered the supplies. They needed iron, water, and a few other essentials, but now the real test had begun. They needed to leave the cave without being detected, and the only way out was through the Cathari. Lara's mind raced. The Cathari were no ordinary enemies. Their soldiers were towering, strong, and highly trained in combat. But they had one major flaw. They relied too heavily on brute force. They didn't understand human tactics the way humans could adapt and use their surroundings to their advantage. That was what Lara was counting on. She motioned for the crew to follow her as she carefully led them deeper into the cave system. Every footstep seemed too loud. Every breath felt too sharp. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant, steady approach of their enemies. Lara glanced over her shoulder at the crew. They were nervous, but they trusted her. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We can't fight them head-on, but we can outsmart them." The crew nodded. They had no choice but to trust her. They kept moving, quietly as possible, until they reached a narrow passage that led deeper into the planet's crust. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, and it twisted in sharp turns, making it difficult to see ahead, the perfect place to set a trap. Lara's mind worked quickly. The Cathari would have to enter this narrow passage if they wanted to find them. That was their opportunity. They could use the limited space to their advantage. With a little time and creativity, they might be able to slow the Cathari down long enough to escape. "Reese, get to the rear of the passage," Lara said. "You've got the most experience with making traps. We'll need something that can block the Cathari long enough for us to slip past." Reese nodded without hesitation. "Got it, Commander. I'll need some of the iron we gathered." Lara motioned to the rest of the crew to start setting up. They worked together quickly, using the materials they had collected from the caves to create an impromptu barricade. The goal wasn't to stop the Cathari completely. It was to slow them down just enough to buy the crew some time to escape. While Reese worked on the trap, Lara took the opportunity to study the Cathari's movements from a hidden vantage point. The Cathari had already entered the cave system, and their heavy footsteps rumbled through the stone. They were methodical in their search, scanning the area with military precision. But they were focused on one thing: catching their prey. They hadn't expected a fight. Lara smiled to herself. She had planned for this moment. Once the trap was set, she signaled for the crew to fall back, using the winding passages to lead them deeper into the caves. The Cathari would follow, but they would have to navigate the narrow tunnels. That's where the trap would work to their advantage. The crew moved quickly, taking cover in the darkness. Their hearts raced, but they kept their breathing steady. They had no choice but to trust the plan. Lara stood at the head of the group, watching carefully as the Cathari advanced. Their heavy footsteps were closer now, the sound vibrating through the walls. Lara knew it wouldn't be long before they reached the trap. At the perfect moment, Lara gave the signal. Reese triggered the makeshift barricade, sending a pile of rocks and debris tumbling down the narrow passage. The Cathari soldiers, caught off guard, rushed forward only to be blocked by the pile of debris. The humans had created a temporary barrier, just enough to force the Cathari to stop and clear the path. It worked. For a few moments, the Cathari soldiers were distracted, scrambling to move the debris out of their way. That was all the time the crew needed. Lara motioned for them to move. They quickly slipped past the Cathari, taking advantage of the soldiers' momentary confusion. As the crew moved further into the cave system, Lara allowed herself a moment to breathe. They had bought themselves some time, but the Cathari were not easily defeated. Lara knew it was only a matter of time before they regrouped and continued their hunt. The crew had to stay one step ahead. "We're not out of danger yet," Lara said quietly. "Keep moving." The crew nodded, their eyes focused on the path ahead. The cave system was a maze, but they knew it better than the Cathari. They had to keep their wits about them. The only way to survive was to stay one step ahead of their enemies. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. The crew pressed forward, hoping to find an exit or a safer place to hide. The further they moved, the more the cave system seemed to open up, revealing vast underground chambers and tunnels. The planet's core was alive with activity, the flow of energy beneath their feet steady and strong. Finally, after what felt like hours, they found a large open cavern. It was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the ship's damaged engines in the distance. The cavern offered some cover, but it was too large to hide in for long. Lara knew they couldn't stay here forever. She turned to the crew. "We're going to need a new plan. We can't keep running forever. It's time to take the fight to them." The crew looked at each other, a mix of fear and determination in their eyes. They had been running for hours, but now Lara was telling them to fight. It was a risk, but it was the only option left. "Everyone, prepare for a counterattack," Lara ordered. "We'll use everything we've got. We won't let the Cathari make us their prey." As they gathered their weapons and tools, Lara felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The Cathari had underestimated humanity, and now it was time to show them what humans were capable of. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking the fight to the most lethal species in the galaxy. The Cathari would learn one thing: humans were not to be taken lightly. They were stronger than their enemies realized, and they would never back down. This part of the story focuses on the crew's cleverness and ability to adapt. It shows their growing confidence as they take the first steps toward fighting back, not just surviving. The tension builds as the crew faces a new challenge and the stage is set for their counterattack. Let me know if you'd like any changes or further adjustments. The silence in the cavern was suffocating, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. Commander Lara Wilkins surveyed the area with a sharp eye, her mind racing. The counterattack she had planned was the only option left. But there were risks. They were on the edge of the Cathari's territory, and the Cathari themselves were formidable warriors. Yet Lara had seen the one thing that made the Cathari dangerous: their arrogance. The Terran crew had been running for days, constantly evading the Cathari's search parties. Now, the time had come to take the fight to them. They could no longer hide in the shadows. It was time to strike. But even as Lara prepared for their counteroffensive, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Cathari were not just hunting them. They were adapting. And with each step the humans took, the Cathari seemed to be a step ahead. Lara called the crew together in the heart of the cavern, away from the dangerous eyes of their enemies. She could feel the weight of their gaze, their hopes, and their fears resting on her shoulders. "Everyone listen up," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We have one shot at this. The Cathari may think we're running, but they have no idea what we're really capable of. We'll take out their key supply lines. If we can disrupt their logistics, we might be able to cripple their forces. Lieutenant, Marcus spoke up, his voice tight with concern. Commander, are we sure we can disrupt their entire supply chain? The Cathari are not like the other species we've faced. Their operations are far more advanced, and their warriors are unpredictable. Lara met his gaze unflinching. We're not going to beat them with strength, but we can outsmart them. We've been playing catch-up, but we've learned their patterns. We know their weaknesses. If we strike quickly, we can create confusion. That will give us the edge. Her crew exchanged looks, silently weighing the risk. Finally, Chief Engineer Reese spoke up, his voice quieter than usual. What if they have something we don't know about? Something we can't predict? Lara paused. This was the question she'd been dreading. The Cathari were a species of secrets and ancient technologies. The more she thought about it, the more she began to wonder if there was something even more dangerous hiding beneath the surface. We don't know what they have, Lara said finally. But what we do know is that we've survived this long because we adapt. We use our brains, our creativity, and our will to survive. That's how we'll win. The crew nodded, their faces a mix of fear and determination. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. Time was running out. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Lara and the crew made their way back to the ship, carefully working to prepare it for what was about to come. They would need to get the ship off the ground and into the atmosphere, without being detected by the Cathari. The only way to do that was to hit fast and hard with precision. If they hesitated, they'd be caught. Once they were in the air, Lara gave the command. The ship soared upward, its engines a soft hum against the planet's silence. They had only one chance to get in position before the Cathari realized what was happening. The ship rocketed through the clouds, heading toward the Cathari's supply depot. As they approached, Lara's heart pounded in her chest. This would be their first true test of the plan. If it worked, it would cripple the Cathari's war machine. If it failed, well, she wasn't thinking about failure. They approached the target, a large complex of Cathari ships and supply bunkers, each one a symbol of the Cathari's might. Lara watched as Marcus and Reese worked together, preparing the ship's weapons and systems. The Terran ship was small compared to the Cathari's, but it was nimble. It could do things the Cathari couldn't expect. Ready? Marcus said, his voice tense. Now or never, Lara replied, her voice cool. Fire! The ship's weapons fired with a quick, deadly precision, launching a barrage of explosives at the Cathari supply depot. The blast was spectacular. The complex erupted in flames, fire and debris filling the sky. For a moment it seemed as though the Cathari would be knocked back on their heels. But then, something unexpected happened. The Cathari didn't retreat. Instead, they responded with a terrifying speed. Lara watched in horror as Cathari warships rose from hidden hangars beneath the surface, faster than she had anticipated. They were prepared for this, and they were not going to give up without a fight. Lara's heart sank. The Cathari were smarter than she had given them credit for. They had been waiting for this move. The humans' counterattack had only triggered a larger response. The Cathari were adapting faster than they could keep up. "Commander!" Marcus shouted. "We've been detected. They're launching a full assault." Lara's eyes flickered over the screen, where dozens of Cathari warships were closing in on them. They were outnumbered, and the odds were becoming impossible. "Turn the ship around," Lara barked. "Get us out of here, Marcus." The ship jerked as Marcus worked the controls, but the Cathari were already too close. The first shot landed with a violent explosion, shaking the entire ship. The crew held on, bracing for the next strike. Lara's mind raced. She needed a way to survive. They couldn't outrun the Cathari, not with so many of them surrounding them. But there was one thing she hadn't counted on: the Cathari's overconfidence. "Marcus," Lara said, her voice calm despite the chaos, "I need you to push us through the asteroid belt. Get us close to the edge of their fleet. It's our only chance." Marcus hesitated for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. He understood. It was a crazy plan, but it was their only option. "Hold on," he yelled, slamming the controls. The ship lurched as Marcus maneuvered it toward the asteroid field. The Cathari ships followed, but the asteroid field was dense and unpredictable. It was a risk, but it was their best chance of losing their pursuers. As the ship darted through the massive floating rocks, the Cathari were forced to slow down, trying to navigate the treacherous path. Lara could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. The Cathari were close, but they had just bought themselves some time. "We're not done yet," Lara muttered to herself. But even as they dove deeper into the asteroid field, something gnawed at her. The Cathari were not just chasing them, they were hunting them. And with each move they made, the Cathari were learning, adapting, and becoming even more dangerous. This part builds up the tension as the crew realizes their initial success might not be enough. The unexpected turn of events leaves them in a race for survival, setting up the next phase of their struggle against the Cathari. Let me know if you'd like to make any adjustments. The asteroid field was a chaotic maze of spinning rocks and debris, a deadly game of survival. The Cathari were relentless in their pursuit, but for once, it seemed that the humans had a chance to outmaneuver their enemies. The ship shook with each narrow escape, every passing asteroid seeming like it might be the one to bring them down. But the Terran crew had learned to survive through impossible odds, and now they had one last chance to prove that they could beat the Cathari at their own game. Commander Lara Wilkins gripped the edge of her seat, her eyes glued to the view outside the ship's small window. The asteroid field stretched out in every direction, and the Cathari ships were close. Too close, but for now they were stuck behind the debris, unable to follow. Lara's mind raced. The Cathari were no strangers to danger, and they would adapt quickly. She couldn't count on this small victory for long. "Status report," Lara barked over the ship's intercom. "Engines are holding steady, Commander," Marcus replied, his voice tense. "But we're running low on power. The ship can't sustain this for much longer. We'll need to find a safe place to regroup, or we'll be sitting ducks." Lara nodded grimly. "Find us a location where we can hide. Anywhere that can give us a few hours of peace. We need to come up with a real plan." For a moment, silence filled the ship. The crew had already been through so much, but they knew that the Cathari were not going to stop. They had underestimated humanity before, but that mistake was one they would not make again. "There's a planet nearby," Reese spoke up from his station. "It's a small, uncharted world. Its atmosphere is thick, but the surface is barren. We might be able to hide there while we make repairs and plan our next move." Lara thought for a moment. It was a long shot, but it was their best chance. "Set course for the planet, get us there quickly." The ship adjusted its trajectory and the crew braced themselves for another hard landing. The asteroid field had taken its toll, and the ship groaned under the strain. But they had survived so far. They would survive this too. Hours later, they touched down on the surface of the barren planet. The land stretched out before them, rocky, desolate, and devoid of life. The perfect place to hide. The crew disembarked cautiously, knowing that they couldn't afford to let their guard down, even here. The planet was isolated, but the Cathari were never far behind. Lara stood at the entrance of the ship, her eyes scanning the horizon. There was no sign of the Cathari, but that didn't mean they were safe. "We have a small window. We'll set up camp here, get the engines repaired, and prepare to take the fight back to the Cathari. I know we're all tired, but we don't have time for rest. We're at war now." The crew nodded, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had been through so much already, but Lara could see the spark in their eyes. They weren't giving up, not now, not ever. Lara paced back and forth, her mind working. She had to come up with a plan, something to turn the tide. She knew that the Cathari would be searching for them soon. They would never let a few humans escape so easily. But Lara wasn't just relying on her crew's skill. They had something the Cathari didn't: human ingenuity. She glanced over at Marcus, who was working on the ship's systems. "How are the repairs coming?" she asked. "Slow," he replied, wiping sweat from his brow. The damage to the engines is extensive, but we're making progress. It'll take time, but we'll get there. Keep me updated, Lara said. We're going to need those engines at full power if we're going to fight back. The crew worked tirelessly throughout the day, repairing the ship, scanning the planet for any signs of the Cathari, and preparing for the worst. But in the back of Lara's mind, she knew that the true test was yet to come. The Cathari were no ordinary enemies. They were more than just warriors. They were hunters, and hunters didn't stop until they had caught their prey. As the hours turned into night, the crew gathered inside the ship, their faces tired but resolute. Lara stood before them, taking a deep breath. It was time. The Cathari will be on us soon. We fought hard to get this far, but now it's time to turn the tide. We need to hit them where it hurts. We have the resources, we have the element of surprise, and most importantly, we have each other. This fight is far from over, but I believe in each of you. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. We may be outnumbered. We may be outgunned. But the Cathari made a mistake. They underestimated us, and they'll pay for that mistake. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew. The fear in their eyes had been replaced with something else. Determination. Hope. Marcus, Lara said, turning to the lieutenant, I need you to get those engines online. We're going to hit their supply lines. We're going to make them feel the cost of this war. Reese, I need you to help him. We'll give you everything we've got. Marcus nodded, his face set. We're ready, Commander. Lara turned to the rest of the crew. The Cathari won't stop until we're destroyed. But we're not going to let that happen. This is humanity's fight now. We fight for each other, we fight for survival, and we fight for the future. As the crew began to prepare for the next phase of their plan, Lara stood in the center of the ship, her heart racing. The war was far from over, but humanity had something the Cathari didn't, something they couldn't take away, the will to survive. And no matter how powerful the Cathari were, they would learn that lesson. Humanity would rise, and this time they would make sure the Cathari never underestimated them again. This final part brings the crew back together after a tough fight for survival, showcasing their resilience and determination. The stakes are high, but the focus on humanity's adaptability and resolve sets the stage for an exciting, victorious fight. Let me know if you'd like any changes. Mini.